Can you play multiple characters at once? Find out in this video.
Yeah. I'm inspired. I'm inspired.
Hey there guys, how's it going? My name is Sumit Chatterjee from the Flow Zone Academy, and I'm a flow state coach, which means that I help you feel better and perform better. I was at some kind of passport renewal office today. I just noticed when I'm doing 3D things, it's like takes me out of the fifth dimension, like really quickly. So it's good to be back. Good to be recording a video for you guys. So today I want to talk about multiple personality order. Okay, my mentor AZD, he says he has multiple personality order, which is a very interesting way to say that you're using or hopping different identities, different characters that you're playing, right? So psychology would tell you otherwise, okay? Psychology believes that it's a process of fragmentation to integration, okay? So essentially, in psychology, they believe that we have all these fragmented selves, right? You have a nice guy version of you, you have a bad boy version of you. You have a version of you that is highly ethical, and you have a rebellious side to you, right? That doesn't follow certain rules and regulations. You have a version of you that's more masculine, a version of you that's more feminine, right? So the fact is we're split into multiple personalities already. These are fragmented identities. Now, can you hop from one personality to the other? Yes, you can, and you're doing it all the time, in fact. I'm sure with certain people, you don't act the same. Like with your parents, you're not going to be speaking with your parents like you do with your friends, like swearing all the time and freely open and kind of vulgar. Like, you know, with the boys, you can be a bit of vulgar and like open and like, yeah, whoa. In a different household, there's a different level of respect. Now, I believe there's a certain power and freedom that comes from being authentically you and only you and nobody else, and just pretty much being the same person everywhere you go, right? So this is the way I want you to see this. There is an overarching personality, okay, that is you. Now, I want you to think of the you as the observer, not as the physical flesh form, not as the job occupation you have or what you do or who you're friends with or what gender you are. None of that matters as much as the eternal self. So when I come back to this idea of technically we are integrated and we can choose from this choice point, vantage point, right? Where you can choose like which personality to hop into now. And let me tell you this, okay? This is a productivity hack that I learned from one of my friends back in the day, David Caldecott. So essentially he said that running a business by yourself is quite difficult, even for a one-man show or a one-woman show, right? So in the same context, what you want to be really saying is, okay, right now I'm going to write an email, and I'm going to put my email hat on. All right, you're going to be way more productive because you don't have that burden. It won't be like, okay, yeah, Blank is doing everything. Jim is doing everything by himself. It will be like, okay, I'm stepping into that role, stepping into that persona now. We all have different roles. We have to know which roles we want to play in order to function. So a disorder means there's chaos in the roles. And oftentimes, when you have two different roles that aren't speaking to each other, you're going to have conflict, internal conflict from within, right? So if you have your shadow self not communicating with your light self, right? You have a Sith Lord inside of you that's not communicating with the Jedi side of the Force, you're going to have an internal conflict take place, right? You're not going to feel right. It's going to feel like bad or toxic, or, you know, you're going to feel more inwards and repressed, and all these different ideas like depression is going to kick in and things like that. But if you have these two characters within you communicate with each other, it's going to open something up. It's going to create an internal connection, okay? So you know how Napoleon Hill had a council of different characters that he consulted, right? That's very powerful. Okay, that's ultimately very powerful. And you want to really understand this idea. When we say the word genius, who do you think of? Einstein, right? That's the label of genius. But even Einstein, when he was growing up, he didn't talk much. right? He was a very socially awkward guy. He was very inwards. Hey, if the words of Asperger's, autism, ADHD, ADD existed back then, Einstein would be that. Thank goodness those labels weren't invented yet so that Einstein could be Einstein, which we now later know as we iconize him as a genius. So whenever we label something, we make it true, we make it real, okay? So start to understand that if you have a negative label that you've been given or you've been giving to yourself, that's going to formulate into the character archetype slowly. So you want to remove like a filtration system of all the characters that do not belong. Okay, basically banishing them from the fortress. Like, let's say you have a trait of like biting your nails and you don't enjoy biting your nails. Guess what? You're gonna keep biting your nails. Why? Because subconsciously you haven't closed the gap, closed the loop. You haven't accepted that about you yet, that you do that. You still think, yeah, it's okay. And there's some payoff there. There's some payoff there. It's a self-soothing mechanism. Maybe it's helping you with your anxiety to bite your nails. Maybe it's an unconscious activity. Now, if I told you, hey man, that's the coolest thing, man, your character attribute, you biting your nails, that's badass, you know? You will actually be like, oh, really? You think that? And they will be able to actually let it go at that point because they'll accept that part of themselves, you see? Whatever we resist will persist. So the characters that you resist, they're actually building inside of you. Okay, you've got to understand this. Are there any characters that you see and you get super triggered by them? You have to process those characters from within in order to let go of the reaction that you get when you see those people. There are, for me too, man. I was always very triggered by the idea of the AllAmerican Jock archetype. And I've spoken about this idea before, but I think from experiences growing up and just seeing that, I mean, most of the times when I had bullies, it was that archetype. So now I understand it differently. I actually experienced that whole archetype differently. And I started adopting some of the mannerisms of the jock to actually integrate that part of me. For example, I wore like a varsity jacket with like a logo on it when I was in London doing my master's program. A bunch of different elements like this. I started walking, I started taking up more space, right? Like chest bump people, right? And all of that was so I could integrate that character so I could let it go. Not because I want to be a jock, absolutely not. But there are elements of the character that you're triggered by that if you don't adopt nonsense behavioral traits and very sickening behavioral traits and, you know, things that will get you in jail. Obviously, I don't have to give a disclaimer here. You're a wise person. You're not going to do silly things and break the rules and laws of the land. But at the same time, if you find little elements of it, you can then proceed to engage the parts of your character that you truly want. So can you play different characters at the same time? Yes, you can. But make sure that you're coming back to the refresh mode, meaning you're coming back to that observer mode of meditation when you're just purely yourself and nobody else. I think that's really important in order to revitalize all the characters that you choose to hop into. So let's say one moment you're the businessman. Let's say if you walk into a nightclub, I don't think you want to be a businessman unless that's your archetype and it works for you and it has been working for you. But there's gonna be a weird off thing whether you're coming from work and then you're going to the nightclub, right? There are these two separate identities that take place. One is more serious, it like makes business decisions and all of that. Yes, it might be attractive, it might work for you, you know. However, it's not gonna work for you as much as the guy who's self-amusing, having fun, out for a good time, etc., right? So this is a great example from when you're making this switch, the character switch. So you're going from very push yang energy to more of a letting go light energy. Now, it doesn't mean that you lose your yang in that environment either, right? You still keep your core frame alive from when you're coming from work. But what you're allowing yourself to do is to actually release stress and speak about it so you slowly you're getting these like little cues, little hits of like almost like how when Bruce Banner becomes the Hulk, right? Like, you won't like it when I'm angry. Or like Dragon Ball Z charging up. There's this like charge up point or a moment of transformation taking place. So understand, as soon as you get out of your work clothes into your party clothes, you're putting on your cologne, there's a ritual happening as you're transforming. It's like you're beating your chest, you're playing different kind of music that puts you in a different kind of vibe. Maybe what you're doing is you're calling your friend to speak to them to get into a talkative state, right before going out. I've done that before. It's wonderful to be able to do that. If you don't have anyone to talk to, if you're not going out with anybody, with your friends, call one of your friends and get into a talkative state about that. It's really powerful because that transfers onto the environment, right? So this is an example. You're cueing yourself, right, as you're transforming, as you're shape-shifting. So you're going boop, 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 boop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? You're just going into that role slowly, and you'd be like, man, I really enjoy this conversation. I was just working all day, but you get me so out of my head. And it's so nice to speak to you. You got to verbalize that, to actually embody this new character of you feeling light. And also to acknowledge the old character of what it was doing for you. You see what I'm saying? So that old character is still in the background there because you just came from that role. Right? Let's say you're a teacher and you get back home with your girlfriend or wife and you start teaching her things. Maybe she doesn't want to be taught at that moment. You see, I struggled with this for a while, right? I wouldn't be playing the boyfriend role. I'd be playing the coach role. So you got to understand that there's certain times where you got to just drop that role, drop that mask, and be a different person for that person, right? The reason the AZD can have 6 or 7 girlfriends, he's appeasing to each of their different fantasies in a unique way with each of them. And each relationship is different, right? It's not the same. There might be similar patterns, but it's not the same. So that's what I'm talking about, is you come back to the core self and have the council of characters that you go into. And notice that when the issues start happening, those characters aren't speaking to each other. Okay? When the characters stop speaking to each other, you're gonna feel split inside. But when you start a conversation, like imagine 2 parts of you, okay, the shy version and the outgoing version, meeting in a cafe. Okay, I love this visualization. Try this out. Meeting in a cafe for the first time. And what would they say? Shy person goes first. Hi. I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. It's nice to meet you. Hey, what's up, man? Oh, it's great to meet you, bro. What's going on? Fist bump? Oh, okay. And you have this conversation in your head, okay, with these 2 versions of you. And eventually, you'll notice the energy coming to a sweet spot, a flow state, a midpoint, where it's kind of, a shyness is not the personality, it's a tendency, right? And outgoingness is not the personality, it's a tendency. And once you start to see that it's a dynamic process, and both of them are coming to the same midpoint, the equilibrium point, the equanimity point, then both of them can get up and hug each other. And as they hug each other, they're morphing into one character. And that's how you can almost be like an amoeba and whoosh, split into another character from one character, but also bring it all back into one character. Does this make sense? So you can have like clones, like shadow clone jutsu, right? You can have many different clones of you that have many different attributes, but again, it's all Naruto. It comes back to that character. Okay, so this is what I want you to understand. I hope you got a different perspective from watching this video. Thank you for asking the question. Josiah or Brosiah, you asked that question. It was great. Thank you so much for asking, brother. Oh, by the way, guys, this video series, right, is basically going into the idea of character a lot because this is what I'm fascinated in. I have an event coming up at the end of this month. It's called Writing a Reality, okay? Writing a Reality is 3 days. Basically, we're going to be quantum jumping into the character that you truly prefer. Okay, so if you want to do a payment plan, figure it out, get back to me. and we'll get you on there, okay? Have an incredible day. May the flow be with you and stay legendary. Let's get it. Boom.